States challenge USDO rollback of transport standards. A coalition of 17 states and the District of Columbia has sued the U.S. Department of Transportation, USDOT, and the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, arguing that the federal government unlawfully reversed transportation performance standards that states already use to plan, fund, and deliver infrastructure projects. The lawsuit centers on FHWA's greenhouse gas (GHG) performance measure rule, finalized in 2023, which requires state departments of transportation and metropolitan planning organizations (MPOs) to track and report emissions trends from on-road transportation systems. The plaintiff states contend that USDO's subsequent rollback and refusal to implement the rule violates federal law and destabilizes long-term infrastructure planning. While the rule involves emissions measurement, the dispute is ultimately about how transportation infrastructure is governed and whether states can rely on federal standards once they are formally adopted. Infrastructure planning relies on federal consistency. Performance-based planning has long been embedded in federal transportation policy. States are required to use federally defined metrics covering safety, congestion, pavement condition, and system reliability when developing long-range transportation plans, state transportation improvement programs, STIPs, and regional capital strategies. The plaintiff states argue that the GHG performance measure was lawfully established under existing authority and folded into those same planning processes. Once finalized, states and MPOs began integrating the requirement into modeling systems, staffing plans, and compliance workflows. Reversing the rule after that work was underway, they say, creates planning disruption with no clear replacement framework. According to the complaint, agencies invested significant public resources in data collection systems and technical modeling to meet federal expectations. Undoing the rule mid-cycle forces states to either unwind those investments or maintain parallel systems without federal backing, both costly outcomes for infrastructure agencies already managing tight timelines and budgets. A dispute over oversight, not project selection. The lawsuit does not argue that the federal government should dictate which transportation projects states build. Instead, it challenges USDA's ability to retreat from a performance standard that Congress authorized FHWA to set and states were required to implement. For national infrastructure systems, particularly interstate highways and freight corridors, consistency across jurisdictions matters. The plaintiffs argue that rolling back a national performance measure fragments transportation oversight and weakens the comparability of system performance across state lines. The complaint also raises procedural concerns under the Administrative Procedure Act, asserting that USDOT failed to provide a reasoned explanation for abandoning a finalized rule that states had already relied upon in good faith. Real consequences for capital planning. For infrastructure owners, planners, and investors, the case underscores a broader risk. Policy reversals can ripple directly into capital planning and project delivery. Transportation projects are planned years in advance and often depend on layered financing structures that include federal funds, state matching dollars, municipal bonds, and private investment. Performance measures help justify those investments, guide prioritization, and demonstrate accountability to the public. When federal agencies reverse course without a stable alternative, agencies may delay approvals, reopen planning assumptions, or shift resources toward lower-risk projects. Over time, that uncertainty can erode the effectiveness of performance-based infrastructure management and slow delivery. Implications beyond transportation. Although the case focuses on FHWA, its implications extend beyond highways. States argue that once federal agencies require infrastructure systems to be planned around specific performance measures, they cannot abandon those standards without accounting for the planning systems and public investments built around them. As federal infrastructure spending remains elevated across sectors, the lawsuit highlights a growing tension. States want flexibility in how they deliver projects, but they also need federal rules that are durable enough to plan against. The outcome of this case could help determine how stable federal infrastructure standards remain and how much risk states must absorb when those standards shift midstream. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.